Today I'm chopping up my stamped images and rearranging them. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. I'm here on the Altenew YouTube channel twice a month. So if you like my videos, I'd love for you to subscribe. So let's get started. This is the beautiful Builder Garden branching roses. There's that beautiful floral image in the centre, as well as lots of lovely sentiments. There is the add-on die set, which coordinates with the floral image and also the larger of the sentiments. And then there's the coordinating stencils, which you can use with ink blending to colour in the images. This is my inspiration for my tag today. This is the card that I made for the blog hop and I absolutely love how it turned out. So I thought I would do something similar on my tag today. I've got a piece of classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock that I'm adding into the stamp wheel. I'm then taking the coordinating die and I'm going to use this to know where to stamp my image. Sometimes with these larger images, I sometimes manipulate them slightly when I'm stamping them, and then when I go to die cut them, the die does not match. So an easy way to do it is to place your die down first and then place the stamp over the top, and it kind of fits on a bit like a puzzle piece. Now it's definitely not foolproof, but it does seem to work most of the time when I do it. You definitely could die cut first, but I'm not always a fan of that and I do prefer to stamp first. So I'm bringing in the top flip plate of the stamp wheel here, and that's going to pick both of them up. I can remove that die and then I can ink up my image using Obsidian Pigment Ink. This is a really lovely dark black crisp ink. It is a pigment ink, so it does take a little while to dry, but compared to other pigment inks, it is really quite quick. I'm inking up this image really well. It is a large image, so it is taking a little bit of time for me to ink this up, but I do like to ink up my images as best as possible. I can then flip over that top flip plate and stamp that down onto the cardstock. I'm going to use my fingers here to press that down. Now I did miss a couple of areas in the centre. I got a lighter impression in the centre compared to the outside edges, and this often does happen with some larger images. So as I lift that off, I can see that I haven't got a perfect impression in the centre. I could just flip over that flip plate and press it down again, but I decided to ink up the image again and then stamp that back down. And that's the great thing about the stamp wheel. I can stamp it multiple times if I need to. Like I say, because this is a pigment ink, this does take a little while to dry. And for today, I wanted to speed things up a little bit. So I'm bringing in my heat tool so I can heat set that ink. Usually I do set it aside to dry and it doesn't take that long, but I was being a little bit impatient today. Once that's dry, I can bring in the coordinating die. I can place that over the top of the image, hold it down with some low tack tape, and then I realised at this point my cardstock was too big to fit in my die cutting machine, so I'm just going to cut those pieces off. I can save them for sentiments. I can then run that through my die cutting machine and I can pop out the image, and it's beautiful just as it is in black and white, but I am going to add some colour on top. So I've placed that on my sticky mat, and now I can bring in the first stencil. I can place that over the top and that sticky mat is going to hold it in place while I do my ink blending. I am just going to cover a little bit of that stamped image up just in case I get ink where I don't want it. I'm now using the new Sun-Kissed Delights Fresh Dye Ink collection and the mini blending brush that comes with the Builder Garden set. And I'm using the lightest shade in these inks, and I'm just going to go over this rose here to start with. I know that I don't need all of this image, so I'm not going to add ink blending on all of it. I'd kind of sort of worked it out in advance which parts of the image I wanted to use. So I'm not going to kind of waste my time and go over the other pieces, but I am going to keep those pieces after I've cut it out so that I can use them in another project, and then I can use whatever colour I want on those pieces as well. So I've added the light layer of the lightest shade of ink. I'm just using the 3 lighter shades of ink from the collection today. I can then take that stencil and move it around so that I've got these little flowers here. I thought that I would definitely want these little flowers to add with that larger rose. So again, I'm going in with the lightest shade here and just adding kind of a light layer of this ink on top. I can then remove that stencil, and then I can bring in the second layer of the stencils, and for this I'm using the second lightest shade of the inks from this Sun-Kissed Delights collection, and I really love these peachy shades. So again, I can just go in and add a layer of that onto the rose. And I love that these stencils do all the work for you. I don't need to do any actual kind of colour grading or anything like that, kind of make some areas lighter and some areas darker on these images, because the stencils do all that for me, and I really love how they turned out. So I did just need to clean that stencil before I moved on to these small flowers. And again, I'm using that same shade of ink here. So I can lift that off, and then I can bring in the last layer of the rose. Place that over the top. I am again just going to bring in a little bit of memo tape just to make sure that I don't get that ink where I don't want it. And then I can go in with the second darkest shade of these inks. And I can just add that over these areas here on the rose, and that's just going to really darken those areas up. And I really love, like I say, how it turned out. I really love how these stencils work on these roses. I can then bring in the stencil for the leaves. Now these leaves do have 2 or 3 layers as well, but I decided it would be quite nice to actually have these done in a slightly different way. So I'm just going to use this 1 layer here, but I'm going to go in with the 3 different colours of the Green Valley Fresh Dye inks. And again, I'm just using the 3 lighter shades today. So I'm starting off with the lightest shade, and I'm kind of going in where I think the darkest areas would be to start with, sort of focusing it sort of towards the bottom of the leaves. And then I can go in with the second lightest shade and add a little bit of that to try and darken those areas up. And like I say, I quite like having the rose be the stenciled kind of look with the different layers, and then the leaves be more of a blended look. And then I do just need the other stencil here to fill in the rest of the areas. I've got the stem there on the rose, and then also these other leaves. Now at this point I could have done with adding that other leaf here on the right hand side. I didn't end up adding the colour to it, and I kind of feel that I wished I would, because it would have given me a little bit more wiggle room to manipulate these kind of images, but I still like how it turned out. So now I'm taking the labels and tags to die set, and I've cut this large image from some classic Crest £110 solar white cardstock. And I really love this set because you can just have this kind of shape as a shape, but you can also make it into a tag as well. So I'm taking the whole piece and I'm just lining that up at the top, holding that down with some low tack tape, and then I can run that through my die cutting machine, and you can see on the back where it kind of just lines up with the shape of the die, which is really great. So I've got my hole now in my tag, and I can bring in my image here, and I'm kind of just placing it on top so that I can see where I want the images to be before I do any cutting of the images. If I had just cut it out with the die as it is, I would have cut off a lot of that large rose, and I wanted that to be the focal point of the tag. So that's why I'm doing it in this way. So I've added some removable adhesive onto the back of the image. I can place that down where I want it to be, and then I can flip over the tag, and then I can use my scissors just to kind of fussy cut around this. I'm not cutting all the way to the edge of the tag because I'm going to cut it with the die afterwards, but I'm just wanted to have like a smaller area for me to be able to then figure out where I want the rest of the image to be on this tag. So I can flip that over, and then I can use this other side for the rest of the design on the tag. I can press that down again with that removable adhesive on the back, and then go around the outside edges of this to cut them smaller. And like I say, I can keep these other pieces for another project if I want to do the same kind of thing with the other images in that stamp design. I can then bring in the die again, and I'm going to grab some low tack tape, and I'm going to try and do it. This was a little bit fiddly, I have to say, but I got there in the end. I'm adding the removable tape onto the die and then also the stamped image, and then I'm going to try and remove it carefully from that tag. Like I say, it's just held down with some removable adhesive, and then I can run this piece through my die cutting machine. I can then remove that tape, and now I've got that really lovely edge on the side of this image, and it's going to line up really nicely with my tag. I do have a little bit of excess around this leaf here, so I decided just to cut that off. I thought it would look a bit nicer. So we're just making sure that that's going to line up really nicely. And then I can do the same thing for the other part of the image. I've just got that larger rose in place so that I can see where it's going to all end up. So I can just remove that before I run that through my die cutting machine. And then I've got this other piece here again that's got that lovely edge there that's going to line up nicely on the tag. So I can add some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of these pieces. Just cutting small pieces of the foam tape down and adding that along the back. I could cut out more of the die so that I could kind of pop them up like one on top of each other to create the dimension, but I thought it was probably just as easy for me to cut out the foam tape. I'm taking a little bit of glue stick and I'm adding that onto the back of the foam tape. This is going to give me that kind of wiggle room like liquid adhesive does to make sure that this is going to line up perfectly. If I've taken the time to cut these pieces out, I want to make sure that I add them on the tag in the right place. So I've got that time to wiggle it in place, but I've also got the dimension of the foam tape as well. So just lining that up as best as possible, and then I can do the same thing for the other side. And I think that looks really pretty how it is, and I really love how I've got the large rose as the focal point and then just having that little bit extra on the other side. I have cut another tag from the same classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock, and I'm adding some glue tape onto the back of that, and then I can sandwich those two tags together. I did also add the little hole reinforcer from the Labels and Tags 2 die set as well. I just think it finishes off the tag nicely. I can then thread some twine through the top of the tag and secure that in place at the front. I'm then going to tie that in a bow. And when I tie bows, I do like to have one of the tails of the bow be like towards the bottom and then one be towards the top. I'm not quite sure why, but I just really love that look rather than having the two tails at the bottom. So I'm just manipulating that bow to get it how I want it to be. And then once I'm happy, I can cut those tails down. And I'm just using some scissors there. I've then stamped and heat embossed a sentiment from the Branching Roses set. I thought that the big hugs was quite nice, even though it's a tiny little sentiment. I thought that that sentiment would work quite nicely on the tag. So I've adhered that down with some more foam tape, and then I'm just embellishing now with some crystal clear enamel dots. I really love how these add just that little bit of embellishment but don't detract from the focal point because they're clear, and I think they kind of look a little bit like raindrops. I do think they're really pretty. So just adding a few of those onto the tag. and then I can press those down. And that is the tag finished for today. Like I say, I really love how I got that arrangement on the tag, and it's a really great way to be able to do that by cutting up your stamped images. And you can see here that I've got my card there as well, and I think they work really nicely together as a set, but also I can use them separately as well. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.